Hey there, Vanguard fans. This is extremewirehead looking into another clan here in my clan intros. In this video, I'm going to be looking at Oracle Think Tank, one of probably the oldest clans in the game so far, and well, it's got a lot of tricks up its sleeve, does a lot of amazing things, and in general is one of those clans that you at first didn't think was going to be such a big deal, but suddenly shot to such popularity that it actually overshadowed a lot of decks at the start of the game and ended up being somewhat broken, maybe a bit overpowered. It didn't help that the main character who was using it was incredibly popular, and it became this symbol of how far you could push the game. Now, Vanguard is one of those games where the top of the deck is actually very important. Your ability to guess, your ability to predict events, and allowing for the ability to control the top of the deck, the ability to draw extra cards, becomes a very important factor. In the case of Oracle Think Tank, their ability is the ability of Scry in other games, and this allows them to check the top card, being able to control certain portions of the deck called the stack, and it all around is a very powerful effect because of a number of reasons. One, they are one of the clans that has the hyperest draw in the game, being able to draw out everything that they wanted, as many cards as they need, and also being able to see what the next cards are. These in combination are what make them very strong, and since they've been around for a very long time, I don't think Bushiroad ever thinks about too much about changing the deck. It's in a pretty good place, pretty strong. I wouldn't mind if they just left it as is, but obviously some people would be a bit sad if that's as far as they went. Now, that is the basics of the deck. Oracle Think Tank is all about the ability to see into the future, and their basis is different gods and basically a school of, not a school, a corporation of gods, since their boss is basically CEO at Amaterasu. Now, going down to the cards, we're going to be looking at them as usual from the highest going down, and only cards that I deem rather interesting and something you might want to watch out for. This is not going to be a list of the meta cards because those change, but rather an intro to how OTT thinks and how they will operate. For the first card, we're going to be looking at Kieran, and Kieran shows you exactly what I meant earlier. They are a very simple clan in that they like to draw a lot. So when this unit's attack hits the Vanguard, look at the top two cards, search for one of them, put it in your hand, and the other one to the bottom of the deck. Now, it is a rather simple card, and obviously because there isn't any cost, it just has to hit. Being able to draw an extra card is always great. Being able to choose between two different cards is even better. And being able to leave the other one, the one that you didn't want, to the bottom of the deck, increases your odds for the rest of the game. Now, sorry if I'm talking too fast. Kieran is a card that is incredibly powerful because it adds to the number of cards that you know. Although you've only taken one into your hand, you actually know an extra one, so your invisible hand is actually +2. And this increases the odds of understanding what the rest of your deck is. A lot of what makes Vanguard so interesting is the fact that you're going to have to keep guessing what's on top of your deck, because you're going to be able to use them as triggers, you're going to be able to use them as calls for the paladins, and otherwise make some strange plays that are much harder to predict for the opponent's side. For the second stride, we're going to be looking at the very, very interesting Globe Magus. Now, I don't tend to look at cards that involve archetypes because I think that you should experiment with the clan as you see fit, but I just wanted to show to what extent Oracle Think Tank likes to scry. During your turn, if you have a heart with Magus, you may look at the top card of your deck and put it on top of your deck. You can use this at any moment in the game. Having the ability to know precisely what is on top of the deck at all times means that if you drive check a trigger and want to know what the next card is, you will always know what the next card is. Being able to make these decisions, being able to draw if necessary, knowing when to stop drawing because a trigger shows up, it does limit the game. Now, it's understandable that one of the main limiting factors to why Vanguard allows Oracle Think Tank to exist and not be overpowered is the fact that if you overdraw, you actually overdraw your triggers as well, which puts a damper to your ability to fight back to your opponent. Globe Magus allows you to reduce some of that random element by allowing you to always check your top deck for the entire turn. Very strong, very powerful, and sounds broken, but really, you're only allowed to do it during your turn, and she's got no other skill. There is no additional plus. Rather, it is the information that is plussed on your side, allowing you to make better decisions overall. Those are the only strides I'm looking for. You can look at Take Mikazuchi and all these other fun guys, but these two really show off what kind of clan Oracle think tank. They will always be thinking about what's the next draw, what's the next draw. And making those decisions is what makes them so interesting and powerful. Down to the G3, we're looking first at, obviously, as I've always started with, the Strider. During your turn, when you stride, CB1, look at the top two cards, pick a card from them, put it in your hand, and the other card at the bottom of the deck. Now, this is only slightly better than a CB1 draw. It is done before your drive check, and being able to clear out the other card and having it in the bottom of the deck increases your odds, same as Kieran. Now, this in combination with Kieran means that on your first stride, if you hit, you've got a +2 on top of the triple drive, allowing you a card advantage of 5 on, and that is just what is in your hand, which is, a bit amazing. And when you consider that you also know 2 other cards, you've already reduced the odds of your deck by about 10%, allowing you better flexibility in understanding what the rest of your deck contains. And it's very important to note, when playing OTT, you're going to have to be checking your top deck, checking what your odds are, what your probabilities are, and making decisions based on that. It is very heavily based on this ability to keep track of events, keep track of how things go. In that sense, if you're a very technical minded person, I do suggest playing into Oracle Think Tank first, because it really does get you into the mindset of what a possibly semi-pro player would be thinking about. His GB2 skill is not that important, but I'll note it anyway. GB2, during your turn, if your number of cards in your hand is 4 or more, you may get 5k and a crit. Supreme Heavenly Battle Deity Susanoo is in the long line of one of the first Striders, and he is pretty decent. Always, I will say nowadays, Striders are just so good that you might as well be running some of them or keeping some of them just because of how amazing their skills can be. Next card on the chopping block is Coco. Now, Coco is one of those funny cards, and it's quite interesting to see how it goes, because back when this game was not very popular outside, it still isn't that popular, I would say. Back when it was only super popular in Japan, this is one of those cards that really started to break into the game. It kind of showed that once you thought about it, strange ideas do make some amazing plays. Scarlet Witch Coco's skill, during your turn, if you don't have any cards in your soul, she's a 13k, which earlier in the life of this game, this was very good, because an 8k booster would essentially give you a 21, the preferred power level of the Vanguard back in the day. When this unit is placed on soul, Counterblast 2, if the number of cards in your soul is 1 or less, you may pay the cost. If you do, draw 2 cards. Now, this combination of, on top of the support cards that she has, being able to become a soulless monster that overdraws your deck and do it so early in the game, she basically had the same amount of ability, almost the same amount of fast draw as the first stride of Susanoo combined with Kieran in a single card. There is a very good reason why she kind of created this entire situation where everyone was running soulless decks. Very strong card that, for the life of me, it's quite sad to see that she's gone the way of the dodo, but she was an amazing card, and I still think she can hold her own today because of just how versatile that skill is. Her only weakness now is she's a 10k, and I don't deem that as too much of a weakness. When Vanguards and Rear Guards are hitting for over 26,000, it's that 1k is starting to matter less and less. And the witches have this thing about being soulless, which isn't actually as important as I showed in the first card, but it's something to keep in mind because you'll have to think about it every now and again. you can't really watch out for a card like this, and once it shows up, it just does its thing. And that's another thing about this clan, is just sometimes things just happen in your turn and you've got no way to defend yourself because it sort of just happened. Now, the last card I want to look at in the G3 is one that showed up in one of the very, very, very old cards, and it's one of those cards that really got me into the game and got me thinking very hard about how the clans work and how they think. Goddess of Flower Divination, Sakuya. Sakuya is a very interesting card because when this is placed on Vanguard, return all of your Oracle Think Tank rear guards to your hand. Having the ability to just suddenly up and leave, essentially. Now, a lot of the Vanguard involves playing cards, and when the card is played, fun stuff happens. She basically allows you to repeat such a play, and this is very powerful for a number of different reasons, most especially because it just repeats for almost no cost. If you've got cards that make additional plays, can be easily defeated by the opponent because of certain effects, being able to retreat your entire field is a very powerful skill. I would still put her at cards to consider, although nowadays people would be looking at the newer cards. I still think she is very, very powerful and can help you against clans that are very good at retiring, very good at stopping large fields from overwhelming them. Because of the way Sakuya works, she basically gives control back to your side, and having this gigantic hand to reset everything that you need to do is very powerful, makes for a lot of interesting things to do. But otherwise, you may not ever see her, which is, to me, it's very, very sad. That is the last G3 I'm going to look at. There is one more, and I'm going to save that for later, but that's going to be postponed for a little bit later, only because I love this card. So let's move down to the G2. G2, first card we're looking at, is maybe the more important of the two, but the less known, is Stellar Magus. Now, Stellar Magus is another Magus, as noted earlier, but I just have to note it because the skill doesn't really require Magus, and its effect is so ubiquitous right now in how OTT operates that it's actually kind of amazing. When it attacks the Vanguard, whether Vanguard or rear guard position, if you pay the cost, which is Counterblast 1, declare a card from the top of declare a card. If the top deck is the same card, it goes to your hand. If it's not, it goes back. Now, being able to choose these is quite powerful, and if you make a mistake, you know exactly what the top card is, so you could actually play a second Stellar Magus to take it. And what makes it so interesting is the fact that if you make a mistake and don't reveal the correct card, it actually refunds its cost. And this combo of refunding your costs, finding out what the top card is, changing your plans to better suit that strategy, really does make Stellar Magus a very flexible card. And it even goes into combination with things like Globe Magus and other cards, allowing you to basically know exactly what's going to happen next. And it's quite powerful. Having no restrictions such as GB or anything like that just adds extra sauce on top of it and makes for a very, very strong early game that is unstoppable to the opponent. I would highly suggest, if you're thinking about picking up Oracle Think Tank, to have this in your deck. Probably the second most important card, because the first most important card is the next one, which is the amazing Silent Tom. Silent Tom is that card that basically got censored because he was holding a gun, and otherwise was so overpowered that at one point he was almost banned, and for good reason. He is the original special guarder. When this unit attacks, if you have an Oracle Think Tank Vanguard, your opponent cannot call zeros to the guard circle normally. In other words, from hand normally. And having guard restrictions back in the day was such a huge deal because you were usually hoarding your cards in your hand, and if you hoard cards in your hand, you end up with grade zeros. Having another card to hit it for 21 was essentially a death sentence for a lot of decks, and it was so powerful, in fact, that even today, you could actually find some uses for it. Even with stand triggers, it actually comes out pretty okay, because even with the low power, you're still getting something out of it, and it's going to be something rather useful because it can't be a 0, it has to be a 1, 2, or 3. Powerful card, incredibly difficult to find, but if you could, I would say this is probably the one card you should look into. And finally, we're going back up and back down at the exact same time. We're gonna look at two cards. Well, an entire series of cards. What new fans of this game probably never heard of, the chain ride, which is a chain ride that I would say a lot of chain rides, sad to say, have been phased out in favor of having a more streamlined game that doesn't really require certain cards as your rides. But it's still important to see how powerful they can get just because of the combos that you're allowed to make. Godhog Ichibiose and his his entire line turning into the amazing Tsukuyomi series. This is one of those cards that was shown off by a main character and shown off in a main character that made it amazing because she was shown off as a character that had the ability of memory, being able to remember things no matter what happened. And this card represents that in a very interesting way. At the beginning of your ride phase, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, search for up to one card named the first grade 1 Tsukuyomi, ride it, and put the rest to the bottom of your deck in any order. If you roll, you cannot normal ride this turn. This is a free skill, and it does let you know what the next 5 cards are on top of your deck and puts them in the bottom. Going down to the G1 and the G2, they do exactly the same thing, and this is very important because it essentially makes it that if you ride or you don't ride, you will know 10 to 15 and maybe even 16 cards from the bottom of your deck. This is more or less half your deck by the time things get interesting on the grade 3 turn. And what is very important is now you know the exact order, and you even picked out the order of those 12 to 15 cards. And having the memory of these 12 to 15 cards means you can veer the game towards reaching that goal. And once you reach that goal, suddenly you know exactly what's going to show up. You know when to not defend yourself because you're going to get a heal. You know when to attack hard because you know when the crits and the stands are going to show up. It's just all around very powerful. Having all of that information suddenly becomes such a huge deal. It is well known that the Ichibiose Tsukuyomi combo was essentially a gigantic stack, a super stack. And it was one of those very interesting things that essentially took over the Japanese meta for a while because it was so powerful. And all it needed was for the players to understand their decks and to memorize things. I think it was an ingenious idea. It's a very powerful card and maybe something that is somewhat feasible today, especially since they got ride support. But otherwise is one of those things that really showcases everything that was great about Oracle Think Tank and puts it into one system. Anyway, this has been Oracle Think Tank and how they operate. Like I said a while ago, if you were looking to get into the game and just wanted a taste of what kind of high-level thinking each of these players will be going through, not only understanding what kinds of decks they're up against, but also how their deck will play out against it, this is a very strong pick. It does teach you that there is a lot of technical thinking involved, a lot of chance, a lot of take and don't take to make decisions possible, and it all comes together when you look at how Oracle Think Tank pushes and being able to control the amount of draw versus scry and putting it into its place to suddenly burst out and win the game. I would say their big weakness is the fact that once they've hit low cards, it's very difficult to catch up, and all they can do is defend at that point. Otherwise, they have a pretty good game and is something that should be on your radar just because it's actually a somewhat decent deck even today. Susanoo is no joke and can break a lot of decks just because of sheer card advantage. Anyway, this has been Extreme Wirehead. I hope that was interesting to you because Oracle Think Tank was where I got my start. And it probably is a great place if you're trying to teach somebody how to play the game, since all they have to deal with is their side of the field. I would say the same about many other clans, but this especially is important because it makes decision making very easy. The amount of information taken, used, and memorized does teach you a lot of new things about card games and really does make you a better player for all of that effort. I leave you with this, and I'll see you on the next clan intro. Peace.